Welcome everyone to today's webinar over transforming transactional carriers to repetitive business. Let's face it, nothing has really changed in the load booking process in, I don't know, something like 45 years since load boards were introduced up until about 3 years ago. So thinking sort of about that load board nature between a broker and a carrier, things can get pretty dicey. From the broker side, there's a lot of risk in sort of publicly putting a load out there, and two, you don't really know who's looking at your freight. Often brokers today are also inflating the market without even knowing. As carriers call in, they probably see 5 to 10 loads that look just like yours, some listed at 1,500, some listed at 1,800, and some at 2K, driving the price up. And when you think from the carrier side, seeing a load that that they could take being offered out to someone else sort of leaves a void in the relationship and can sometimes leave a bad impression. More times than not, I'd say, like back in my days of booking freight, I'd always have carriers asking me to give them a heads up next time that load pops up and they could take it. That heads up probably didn't often happen if they weren't my top 2 to 3 that I could remember, just often due to bandwidth. And I think now reaching that carrier every time I had a load that matched up with what they could haul wasn't really the only problem. I was also spending at least 30 minutes complying every new carrier I booked. So if we take, if we were doing 1,000 loads a month, and I was booking 700 new carriers a month, that was like 350 hours every single month spent on compliance. If you look at it sort of like in days, it's like 14 full days, or in business days, damn near a month. It's like 28, 29 business days. So whichever way you look at it. Most of those carriers probably never will use again, unfortunately. Now, load boards aren't really the issue. It comes down to, one, the way we interact with them, and two, how we spend our time. And we here at Cargo Chief are already seeing the tilt towards booking sort of the majority of freight digitally, or at least trying to help reduce the number of transactional relationships to drive repetitive business. I'm Chris Arredondo, co-founder and VP of Customer Success, which pretty much means I handle everything customer related here at Cargo Chief. With me today, I've got Mike Massler with McLeod Software and Adam Schaefer with Simple Logistics. So I guess Mike, Adam, tell us a little bit more about what you guys do.
Yeah, my name's Mike Massler. I've been with McLeod for about 4 years total. And then before joining McLeod, I was actually a McLeod customer for several years, but in the industry for about 20. And at McLeod, what I do is I assist the sales team and the product team for any technical demos of our product. So what we do is we'll vet out how a prospect is doing things today and how that's going to look in McLeod and what the future could hold for them.
Adam, what about you? You guys do 2,500 loads a month, something like that?
Yep, my name's Adam Schaefer, VP of Ops over at Simple. Been here for about 5 years now and used to be load coordinator, just kind of slowly worked the way up the operational chain, and I help out with anything ops, from booking loads, cross-docking, bedding carriers, and as of late, put a heavy interest into digital freight matching and that side of the business. So.
And Simple Logistics, you can sort of see that logo here. Is it simple? Check. Love it. Love it.
That's right.
Love that branding that you guys do. So as we get further into today's topic, we'll talk about some of the, I guess, call it limitations of traditional sourcing and real experiences. Furthermore, we'll get into adding a digital strategy while maintaining that human element and how that really can impact your business, as well as some things that McLeod has, what Simple Logistics is doing to help drive carrier retention without all the legwork. Also, through sort of the webinar here, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to add those in the, I think it's like a Q&A chat or a chat box or something, and we should have some time there towards the end to address some of those. So I'm going to try to launch this first poll here. I feel like I always get it wrong every time I try to do this. So let's see, I think I got it. Just launched it. So all of you should see sort of a question there, and thinking about the booking process. How do you like to book freight? There's sort of 3 answers there. One is traditionally, which can be your load boards, carrier sourcing, spreadsheets, whatever it is, sort of more of like a hands-on procurement approach, but also still really utilizing load boards, I would say. And there's fully digital. That's when you think of load boards, that can still be somewhat digital if you're automating with sort of like a like a post button or an automated takedown button, that can be somewhat digital. So I mean, that is still some sort of automation where no one's manually having to go to a load board to post that freight. So there is a mix there, as well as like your DFM tools and different things like that. Then there's sort of a 50-50 hybrid mix, which is a lot of people are shifting to. It's really, load boards, traditional sourcing, procurement teams. But then there's also like load exposure using like sort of automated book now features, or even sort of what we offer at Cargo Chief, more that digital freight matching, digital freight booking experience to help sort of expedite that option process and drive in more insights to you guys. So give a little bit there to get that answered. Let's give 2 more people. Can we get 2 more people to answer? 2 more. I saw one. Oh, there's 2. All right, we got it. It worked. So we'll go and end the poll, and we'll sort of read some of these questions. It's sort of surprising. There's a lot of you that are doing 50-50. It's, I guess that's sort of what we've been hearing in the last couple of years. It's really transitioned to a lot of brokers trying to adopt this digital manner. And a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today is really that drives some of those reasons. And, there's still some that book traditionally. So it looks like 50-50 being the top, traditionally being right there. Fully digital. I don't know if we're ever going to be fully digital. I think it's just really how some of these tools and TMSs transform and evolve with the way that brokers want to book freight, the way that shippers want to book freight, and even carriers, because there's 3 moving parts here, and then the technology companies that are trying to evolve sort of everything. Adam or Mike, is this sort of a surprise, like to kind of what you guys see, or what are your sort of impressions here?
Yeah, it's those responses are pretty much identical to when we go on site to vet out prospects. It just like that it's a lot of manual, a lot of traditional, some hybrid. But to get to that fully digital, it does require a good relationship with your carriers as well.
Yeah, Adam, is that? I mean, you guys, you've been in sort of a unique journey there. I know you guys do sort of a full suite of automation across different products.
We do. We will dip our toe into the automation for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's about what I would imagine. I expected a lot of the 50-50. I'm sure a lot of it depends too on the freight makeup that you have in your brokerage. You're more likely to give a dry load to a fully digital booking rather than a hazmat cross country run, where you want to probably vet it a little bit more. There's going to be that human element. So I'd be interested to see, dive deeper into that poll too, to see what type of freight makeup those were a part of.
Yeah, and the booking process isn't just sort of like, I think what we're going to be talking about today here is really the coverage side, but also in this sort of automation, plug for HubTech Tabby, right? Like they use a lot of like in auto processing the quotes that come through from a shipper standpoint, how that gets put into your TMS, and then sort of automating that whole load life cycle pretty much from quote origin to getting it booked. And then, I mean, now even tracking, right? Like a lot of things can be done very automated. And like you said, it really is dependent on your freight mix and also your carrier mix too, right? Like owner operators may not like have a way to do that. I mean, there are some apps that they can use, but not everybody, right? Not everyone's open to that. I remember when I was at CH, and this is about 10 years in a pandemic ago, that we were trying to get carriers to like accept the tracking links, and it was very difficult to get carriers to do it. And these days it's often required, and so very, very different how the landscape has changed. We'll stop sharing there. We'll have another poll there towards the end of the webinar. We'll launch that later. So let's talk sort of about the traditional booking process and how we see this. And at least me in my past, it was after the load's already been quoted, right? So this is really from the coverage side. That load would get built, and that would take a person. We used to have people that would just do order entry all day, every day. When they got the quote, they'd get the tender. Even EDI, sometimes it's like it's not quite all the way automated, because you got to still add like fuel surcharges, accessorials, different things like that. And there's still like a manual touch there that is required on building that load. And so when you think about, sort of how much time does that really take to build a load? It's often a full employee, 2 full employees, depending on sort of like your structure and your model there. Next is like, okay, I've got the load. Now it's sort of visible to the carrier rep side. Now they do sort of a couple things. Like it's one, they're going to look at their historical carriers, or they're going to go to like their book of business, their spreadsheet, and everybody's got their own spreadsheet. Or they may not very often go through their notebook. That's usually more of like, damn, who's that guy who called? Let me flip through my pages and trying to find that guy. I wish you could control F on like a notebook. That'd be really helpful, but you can't do it. So that's usually the process there. And when you think of like, all right, now I've identified the load I'm going to try to work on. That took time. That takes time to even figure out which one you're going to address. Then which carriers historically do I call after I reach out to my top 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is? That all that's a whole process in itself. Like, does that carrier communicate by email, text? Do I just send them the load? What's that process like for each one individually? And it's not quite scalable. It's very like, this one's this way, this one fits this way, this is a different way. And now when you think of your historical carriers, it's sort of like you have a little bit of emotion. Like you may have 40 carriers that have taken that load in the last 60 days, but do you really call all 40 every single time you get that freight? And it's oftentimes the answer is no. There's history there, but for some reason you're like, oh, I just talked to this guy, or oh, I don't even remember this carrier, or this carrier was too high last time he took it. There's a lot of like just reasoning behind why those carriers don't get called. And even if they do, it's still like, okay, let me call this guy, let me dial it on the phone or click to call or whatever it is, and still 5-10 minutes just to find out that carrier can't take it. Then the next thing is, all right, post to load boards. A lot of people jump from build the load to post to load boards, which it's okay. This stuff takes a lot of time. That's really the procurement role and trying to dissect through that data. So once that load gets posted to load boards, great. It's out there. People can see it. Now is the post and pray again that somebody calls in. And it's like when a lot of times that doesn't really happen, and there's not really a secondary or tertiary source thereafter. If nobody calls in, what happens, right? Like in soft markets, it's different, where there's a lot of carriers calling in, but at the same time, that first carrier, even in a soft market, that first carrier that calls in out of the 20 that you're about to field, those other 19 are you're burning bridges with those 19. 18 of them could have already been in your TMS. You might not have ever known like what lanes they could run. But back to the example earlier that like you don't really have the time or bandwidth to go and find those carriers or call them or even have a way to match that up in real time. It can start to create that void in the relationship, and you're just constantly, hey, no, load's covered by. And there's no real way to sort of like generate that carrier lead the next time you have that freight. And so this is sort of why everything's very transactional, and that it's just time and money are the top 2 things that are prioritized at any company, any organization, anybody. I mean, I would love to have an extra 5 hours a day. That'd be great. Maybe I could go work out or something. I don't know. But so now we get to vetting carriers. This is where the time comes, right? Like in the example that I was talking about earlier, there's traditionally, I've been at a lot of companies that like, okay, we've got our own packet, we got our own set of criteria. Let's send that packet off into a PDF. The carrier's gotta, I mean, if they don't have e-sign or click to sign or something, they've got to go and somebody's got to go write information in. They got to go send their COI, their W-9, all that other stuff, and then push it back to you. Now, when you think about like traditionally still in that paper pushing environment, what if that carrier doesn't have the insurance up to date? And now it's like, okay, now I got to go to the carrier and say like, hey, your insurance outdated, or come the references, right? Like they're trying to send references. Not every broker asks for references, but it's often good to do if they're a new carrier, because you don't really have a good way to really know how they're gonna perform. And so like I've been at places where we check those references every time that we set up a carrier. And that process for me on average was like 30 minutes to an hour. And when you're sort of like an ops manager, or what you would call it, that's sort of in charge of complying, like all of that list starts to stack up. All of a sudden, if you're doing 20 loads a day that are with 20 different carriers, you got 20 packets that are sitting there waiting for you. And you're burning time too, because that carrier is like, I need the rate confirmation. Well, I got to get you set up in our system first. I can't just like trigger that rate con out. Like it's not magic. I wish it was, but it's not how it happens. And you got to comply them and get them in the system. And now it's like, oh, you took too long to send me the rate con, that like now I took another load, and now the whole process starts over. And it's just a never ending cycle of that traditional way of booking freight. And there's a lot of things and that are out there. And I think it's probably a good spot for you, Mike. Sort of what do you see from prospects, customers, or whatever it is, when they're coming to McLeod or they're already on McLeod? How are they booking freight? Is it mostly traditional? Is there already a mix of some sort of automation, but also like that vetting process? Because I know you guys have some sort of features there, but what are you hearing, like when most people come to McLeod? What is that? Where are they in their, I guess, brokerage company journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a prospect before they get onto McLeod, usually it's traditional. It's all manual, right? It's all pretty much one-to-one. Kind of like you said, if I'm going to cover 10 loads today, I'm probably going to onboard eight carriers.
Yeah.
And it does take it's about 30 minutes. That every single prospect has that 30-minute mark. So it's very traditional. It's very transactional. And it's very much a picking up the phone and just smiling and dialing all day. And what happens with that is, if you don't get those first 3 carriers and they don't have any equipment available, a lot of times you're calling the one that you're comfortable with. Well, it might not be the best margin. So you're suffering on margin because you just want to get that load covered. You're comfortable with them. But it could be like a 12% margin on a goal of 18. So a lot of times before they come to us, it's very traditional, and more of the automated to them is, hey, we posted to a load board, and then they call us eventually. That's somewhat automated to them. And that's really from the prospect perspective.
And the vetting side, like what sort of things do you have that kind of helps with that? Because I know, like it really depends, like the compliance process across a broker. Is that what you would say? Like, sort of, are they ready to adopt some of those things that reduce time, or what sort of friction do you see there?
Yeah. So when they do come aboard McLeod, they usually adopt 25% initially of our automation. And throughout probably a year or two, they'll get into that 50, 75 to close to 100% automation. Especially once they start to see our E-rate confirmation, our carrier onboarding process, where it's, basically no more paper. They're going to be able to DocuSign those items, just automatically get an index into our system. They're going to put in their preferences, lane preferences on the onboarding packet. All that information auto-populates in that carrier's master file. So once they start to see those benefits, then they're more apt to purchase those and streamline a lot of processes.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple places and that have got like a big $12,000 fax machine just sitting there, and it's a pretty big time suck, especially when you run out of paper, or God forbid ink. Like, that sucks, but that's another $1,000.
And really, when you come aboard McLeod or an automated TMS that has some of these capabilities, and we may get into this in a little bit, but you go away from that traditional process and let the system do the traditional process, and let you focus on really value-added things and relationship building with those carriers to only enhance that automation, and really get them on board with the automation that helps you get there.
Adam, let's talk, I guess, sort of before Cargo Chief, or I guess even in your past, right? Like, what was that process like booking for? I could talk until we're blue in the face about good and the bad, but
right.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, looking at this picture here, it's, bringing up PTSD of, what it used to be before any automation. And I guess depending on how you're built up in your brokerage, that build the load to that call historical carriers, it could be done by a couple different people before the load board post. I mean, it's pretty easy to build the load and just go straight to that load board. So if you're separated by sales and ops, maybe it's already posted while you're calling historical carriers. And depending on the market, you might be getting flooded with phone calls before you even have a chance to reach out to those guys.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's a mindset of, I have to set aside time to do the historical data, and really going through all that stuff. It's really as good as you can keep clean your system, Obviously, we're a McLeod user, so as clean as we can keep our carrier cards and keep our data in there, it makes it a lot easier to scroll through that stuff. So I think about, before switching into any automation, like you said, everyone had a little black book that they had on their desk. It was like, oh yeah, Illinois to Minnesota. I like this guy. I'll call him right now. So thinking about that as opposed to what we've got now, it brings up memories, not necessarily great ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and it gives sort of your team, not just your team from the brokerage side, but also like your carriers, both of you guys, a chance to communicate differently, right? That it's not so like, hey, do you have a truck? No, all right. Or like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a week. Well, I had those loads, I just didn't have time. Like it's a different sort of communication experience. And I think, we do a lot of Zoom calls and stuff. And I also like to call some of my customers like you, Adam, right? Like we talked a couple times about brisket and stuff. And it's like those are the conversations that just help, right? Like it just helps the entire
Absolutely. So
Yeah, Chris, what we see is those conversations that used to be, hey, can you cover this load? Okay, see you, call you tomorrow. Now it's, hey, what are your plans for next year, right? Are you adding different types of equipment? Is it a van? Is it maybe some flatbed equipment? Are there certain markets that you're looking at tapping into? Do you want to see maybe some potential backhauls that we can start sending you so you can get an idea of what those rates are coming out of that area? And then it's updating your system with that, within that database. That only just, it helps strengthen that relationship and keeps those same carriers coming back to you. And then when you get into some of that additional automation, different, carrier portals that we have, they're more apt to use those. And next thing you know, your carriers are dispatching themselves on the freight that they're accepting, and just very few, transactional pieces of that you're actually working on.
Yeah, that probably brings us to a good segue here to the evolution of automation, right? Like back then, you didn't really have a way to sort of put that lane information. Like there wasn't really anywhere to even do it. Like if a carrier calls in, that's why spreadsheets exist, and that's like sort of where a lot of people have moved to early on. And like now, like McLeod, there's ways to build out those carrier profiles. I think when you think back to load boards though, and like how we engage with a carrier, it is very transactional. It takes a lot of time, especially at some brokerages where, again, like, your TMS might not have that auto post, auto takedown button, and you're actually having to go to a load board to post that freight. The skill isn't in, sort of how many calls you can make or how many emails you can type up individually, how many screenshots you can take to send off. That the part that really requires skill is that negotiation piece. And sort of how we look at it here is taking the sort of the pros of that traditional sourcing. It's the conversations, it's really the relationships, those pieces that require that human interaction. And that's really where the skill is. It's in how well you can talk to people. Because at the end of the day, like if you create a good bond with that carrier, or even your shipper, like it's going to open the door for a lot more opportunities. Like carriers are going to come to you more to try to book freight with you. I remember in my past, like that was part of, at C.H. Robinson, they really drilled in procurement and building those relationships. And as I moved on, that was like the first thing I would try to do with a carrier, is build that relationship and that human interaction. Everything of offering a load was byproduct of the relationship. And sometimes like my team would call one of the carriers that I was really close with, and they're like, yeah, he didn't have any trucks. So I'm like, let me call him, get Rob on the phone or somebody, and I'll give him a call real quick, and he'd give us 2 to 3 trucks. So it's like just about like navigating that process and sort of like how can you use your technology or your TMS and what you've got to like help streamline that learning curve of, instead of having somebody go and calling these carriers, like still, mimicking that ops manager, that person who builds those relationships. How can you mimic that and put that into technology? So I guess, Adam, this is probably good for you. Tell us a little bit more about that human interaction. Why do you guys sort of choose to really take in and own that human interaction? And I guess, how does that help? And how does that help your team adopt technology that you guys use?
Yeah, no, you hit it right on the head. I think I've spoken about digital freight matching a whole bunch, and I think people forget about the human interaction. I think it is still the most important part of the booking process. The carriers, yeah, they may like your freight, but they're going to come back because of you, like you said. And I think a lot of the technology just gives you a big nail to hit, right?
Yeah.
So it makes it a lot easier to swing. It gets you all those carriers that are theoretically interested in your lanes brought in front of your face, to where now you, as the broker, the ops guy, can call them, and you have about as warm of a lead as you can imagine to call. And it kind of takes that transactional piece away from it, because they're already interested. Yeah. So here's your relationship chance, right? Now you can call, see what else they do. It blows my mind how often we are booking a load, right? This guy's doing Illinois to Pennsylvania, right? And we talk enough, and I realize, oh, you are also in California. I never knew that. Yeah. It opens up, like you said, a whole bunch of doors. So I think the evolution is a perfect way. Honestly, I didn't like digital freight matching in the beginning. I was forced into it. I was much more likely to come right in, and I just enjoyed selling loads when guys called in. So, and now that I've been forced, I'm happy for the switch. So
yeah, Jeff is probably satisfied with that return.
I would like to think so. Yeah.
So Mike, I used McLeod for probably like 3-4 years or so in my past, and I know there's a fair amount of feature sets. What are some of the things, I guess, that you guys have that helps with that product adoption? Again, like both new customers or even existing customers as they grow, whether it's booking freight or automation, or what sort of feature sets do you guys have, and how do you deploy that?
Yeah, so one thing that we just released or enhanced, I guess, about a year ago is we've got it's called a private notification network lane builder. So when you onboard a carrier, they're going to tell you which lanes they prefer. Just like Adam was saying, hey, they prefer Illinois to Pennsylvania. Well, 6 months in, 2 weeks in, a couple months in, all of a sudden they're hauling different lanes for you. And our PNN lane builder, instead of having to make that phone call and them telling us what lanes they prefer, the system's automatically adding that to their profile based off of how many times they haul it. So automatically they're going to be getting notified anytime freight is entered in the system that matches that criteria. So it's doing that machine learning, and it's knowing, hey, this customer has been hauling this lane X amount of times per month, and let's add it to that profile. And then in addition to that, so that email notification is going out automatically, there's a portal where they can view freight and accept freight, offer, counter. We go ahead and dispatch themselves, add paperwork, submit a POD, and complete out a load right from their own portal.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know when I started, it would have been really helpful to have some of that technology, because it's very, very tough. And I guess it sort of drives us here to more of sort of a roundtable thing. I guess it's kind of what we've been doing this whole time anyways, but sort of this first topic here, why do brokerages struggle to prioritize carrier attention? Like, you've got the tech to do it, and it's like having the time to actually go do it. For me, it comes down to sort of like 3 things. 1, what does that even mean, carrier attention? 2, it's tough to do. And 3, it's not easy to track. So I think, what is it? it's somewhat another word for, I guess, a fancy word or more of a marketing spin on carrier reutilization, but adding in strategy to actually engage with your carrier mix rather than relying on someone picking up the phone. And I think if you look at sort of a snapshot here before and after, traditionally, there's not really a way to directly correlate how many loads booked was a direct cause of a load board or other sourcing methods. When you look after sort of like this traditional sourcing and automation and more repetitive freight, when we peel back the numbers, we see two things. Number one, the number of freight being pushed through automation, somewhere around 70% of the total load count, which means brokers are, again, trying to book digitally rather than just sort of relying on just a load board for everything. And when we look at sort of the net new carriers added on average, we see that number of new carriers decreasing roughly about 25% over time, meaning that rather than booking, with new carriers, that freight's now going to carriers that you've already vetted and onboarded, increasing that carrier retention. At the same time, getting some of those compliance days back when we talked about damn near a month spent in compliance time. And I think it's really tough to do just because of bandwidth and scalability without using technology that interacts with your data in real time. The other piece of like the last thing of tracking that information, it sort of goes with the way that your TMS can't interact with the sticky notes or the black notebook on your desk or spreadsheets that aren't automatically reacting sort of to your data. So I guess, Adam, when you think about carrier reuse and retention, how does that impact your business, your company, or even your day-to-day as far as, just carriers go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everyone's goal, right? Carrier retention. I want repeat carriers on my freight. I want the same guy. It's always easier said than done. And I think a lot of it, the struggle is the mindset. Some of the automation has made it fairly easy to set up carriers. So now it becomes so easy to just post it on the load, especially in a market like we're in now, where you're going to get a bunch of calls in. I can just set this guy up in 5-10 minutes and get the load rolling on the board. That's not really going for carrier retention. You don't really truly know how good of a carrier that is. He's now a first-time carrier, but like you said, we're kind of living in that world where it's, if there's 10 loads, you're probably setting up, 8 new ones. So where you'd like to see, maybe only 5 carriers being set up for 10 loads. So I think a 2 ratio would be phenomenal. I think the struggle is that mindset. It's trying to force yourself to focus on it and keeping track of your data. If you can keep track of the lanes they like and have it all in one spot, basically have your little black book that's sitting on your desk, but, logged in your TMS correctly, it will make it easier to call those people, offer them out. McLeod makes it easy to send offers out to all your carriers that have done the lane before. We do a lot of routing guide profiles in the system that you can mess with. It's I think a lot of it's keeping your data organized so you can be proficient with it.
Yeah. And I guess here on the next topic, what processes are necessary to transform transactions into more repetitive business, and in clearly put, what do we need to do to sort of make that flip of posting 70% of our freight and dropping that to like 20 or 30%, where the other 70 or 80% is going to your carriers? So I guess, Mike, what are some things that you guys do to help sort of transform that transactional relationship into more repetitive business?
Yeah, one thing comes to mind, and it's continuous moves. Is how do you keep that carrier moving to where they're not calling someone else? And what happens is if you offer out an order through McLeod to a carrier, what can automatically be done within that offer is it can automatically attach up to 5 options to continuously keep them moving. So not just one order, but it's going to offer out another order as well that says, hey, you're filing in Indiana. Well, here's a load that picks up in Indiana that same day, a couple hours after you deliver. So it's going to keep that carrier moving, but it's also going to be better for customer service too, for your end shipper or end customer, because you want that same driver. They know, they can schedule their hours better. And I think that goes a long way, especially with carriers and utilization and hours of service. It's very important to keep them moving to where they can schedule their hours of service as best as possible.
Yeah, that I remember always trying to like book freight in this. I ran a lot of Texas freight, so it was like from Houston to Austin to San Antonio back over, or back to Laredo and back over. There's this like Texas triangle sort of was what it was called, and it was always difficult to like move those in segments rather than all together, because I could like call a carrier and be like, hey, how does it sound if I was able to pay you $1,500 in 2 days?
Yeah.
And you'll be back in time by dinner. Like, how does that sound to you, right? And so, like, all of a sudden, that sounds a little bit more appealing. And yeah, even give me $100. No, it didn't ever happen. Not like that. But so I guess,
yeah, it's turning into just much more of a regional operation, right? Because drivers want to get home more. Carriers want to get their drivers home more. So the more you can show them an out and back, the odds are they're going to accept that, and they're going to accept it for a better rate too, because it's going to eliminate a lot of deadhead on the other end. So
exactly.
It's just a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, there's I used to run a big customer, Nestle Waters, and when I was able to like, hey, Houston to Hawkins, literally load into that same dock, that same door, unload, and they'll reload you in that same door, come back out with your reload. Like that was magical. Didn't always happen, but it was good when we could. Adam, what's your freight mix? I guess your I guess freight mix, and like I think you guys probably post what, like 20%, something like that, 30% of your freight on load boards, or
Sure, yeah, it depends on the day, weather, stuff like that. So I'd be interested to see the full number. The continuous move thing has been, I mean, it's a broker's dream come true, to be able to offer that load, especially if it's on the same dock. What would make a sales guy happier when an ops guy comes and he's like, hey, I have a little guy who's delivering to your shipper. We know exactly when he's going to be empty. We're not going to wait for paperwork. He's literally going to be right there. I mean, it smooths it out and helps a lot with that service percentage that every customer is looking for. So
yeah.
I think go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, that's the, like, we were talking about earlier, like mimicking what Adam, right? Like how can technology, like McLeod, take some of that burden off of either a training team, an ops manager, and trying to train somebody green. Like that's shit you don't really learn until 2-3 years into the job, and usually 2 to 3 years is that mark where people are like, I don't know if I'm gonna stay in brokerage or not. I might go somewhere else and do something different. So like, yeah. So I guess kind of moving on here to the next sort of topic here, a little bit more geared towards us here, Cargo Chief. How do we sort of help, build those relationships in your network? And I try to look at it like, chances are you probably already have a carrier. There just wasn't really a good way to profile those carriers because it takes a lot of time and consistency. Now with like McLeod, this continuous moves or PNN, and just carrier building, like that helps with some of these like inside of your network and how you're able to sort of leverage that. I guess, Adam, what have you seen in sort of that relationship building and profile? Because like, both McLeod, you use both sort of McLeod and Cargo Chief. McLeod having like some carrier access to like your network, but then Cargo Chief, like how you're able to sort of leverage the entire capacity network and the capacity engine. Tell me a little bit about those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, not only does it free up your time to physically talk to them, it by skipping some of those steps, by having to go call them, it brings your freight in front of their eyes, the loads that they like. And, now they're reaching out to you saying, hey, I saw you had this one for Tuesday. What a better way to start a conversation. Be like, hey, yeah, let me give you a call real quick. I do have that one on Tuesday. I'm actually going to have Thursday and Saturday too. Also, what are you doing this weekend? How are you? So now that we got those 3 booked, how's the kids? How many trucks are you running? Whatever, have fun with it. So I get a lot of laughs by people walking by my office hearing some of the stuff that I'm asking a driver. It's like, well, I've already got the booking done. I'm not ready to hang up just yet. So have fun with it.
Yeah, I've talked to we do a podcast on the side called Get Freight to it, and we had another customer, different TMS, but they were talking like I've never really heard this before, where they sort of talk to carriers as like they get into the relationship of, as far as like, how do you talk to your drivers from a dispatcher standpoint? How do you handle your drivers? Like, do you give them time off? What do you like, what does that pay look like? Like, is it per mile, or is it like a flat rate? Like, is it teams? Like, how do you, they really like sort of internalize that relationship, because that's going to help them sort of match up freight that fits that carrier's business much differently. Each carrier's, it's not just every carrier is the same. A lot of them are very different. My mother and my former stepdad used to drive all the time, long haul out to Florida and stuff. And my family did it when I was a kid. So I would ride on the summer breaks and stuff. And back then it was like per mile. And I didn't really know much about trucking, other than there's not really a bathroom anywhere. So there's that. But I mean, it's very different, and each carrier is sort of unique. And the more information you have on that carrier, the better sort of like match you can make, and maybe even putting it to the right person, right? The right pod, or like however you guys are structured, like that's maybe would be better served for Dan or Bill. He's the long haul. He's the he handles the like 20 plus truck companies or something like that, right? Like that's sort of a different way to think about things. And it's just interesting to hear sort of like the evolution, I guess, of the conversation and how it's changed versus, when I was booking freight day one. So I think here in sort of like jumping into C4, what I'll do here in a moment, and how we sort of do this, and just a little bit about how we here at Cargo Chief help simplify that booking process. And with McLeod too, the load gets built in your TMS pretty much. And we work with McLeod to set up rules, criteria, conditions, different things there, like, based on your load status. Is it available? Is it pending? Is it on hold? Is there a max buy, or just sort of different things there? And we can trigger off a lot of different criteria based on how your team is organized. Secondly, what's going to happen is PNN, that, or whatever you've got in McLeod, that probably handles like in your network already, which is great, because that's a step that people don't have to think about. Secondly, in C4, what it's going to do is not just send emails to like carriers in your network, but it's also going to sort of use the entire network of data that we've got, that carriers have hauled across all the TMSs, every other lane that they run. A good example is, often you might only have Houston to Atlanta for one carrier. That's probably the only lane that and you might not even book with them again until you get that load again. But that carrier is still running other freight. So as that carrier runs Houston to Atlanta, Chicago to Columbus, LA to Seattle, whatever other lane it is on some degree of frequency, that lane starts to build and aggregate, and that information onto that carrier profile, all automated. So nobody really has to think sort of like what other lanes does this carrier run. What C4 will sort of do that matching for you. And the kind of the second and the layered approach here is the price. You may get that Houston to Atlanta. Your next one's probably not until 2 weeks from now, but the market changes as it does. And a lot of times people don't really look at that price until 2 days before that load's ready to ship. And then they're going to look at the price. With our sort of pricing engine, we can talk more about it later, but it's really a forecast prediction of the current market. So as that rate changes, we've probably already picked up that this lane is changing. It's going up or going down. And in both examples, if it goes down, well, if we're pushing out, you're paying 1,800 and we said it's 1,600 in 2 weeks, you just made a little bit more margin there. The flip side of that, if today it's 1,600, next week we're predicting 1,800, and we kick out 18, carriers are probably going to start to accept that much quicker, because in 2 days before that load picks, that lane is now going for $2,000. So you've just still even reduced the risk of not even being able to cover that load or having to roll it. And so we sort of do a lot of calculation there, whether it's with your max buy, some of the field that you guys have there in McLeod, and sort of like cross-calculating with our rating engine to make sure we're pushing up a rate that's favorable for not just like the broker, but also the carrier. So then sort of the next leg over is sort of like the expediting the option process. It's really what Cargo Chief and C4 is doing for you guys. It's really streamlining all of the tasks of like building carrier profiles, putting that in somewhere consistently, figuring out who to go and reach out to, queuing up the email and branding it with your logo. Now what you're going to start seeing is options coming to your inbox. And yes, some of those are going to be booking, and we'll show some results, what Simple Logistics sees as far as like their booking rate and things. But also some of those options that are coming through might just be market insight. You might get a carrier saying like, hey, I can do it for $2,000. You've only got 16 in the load. Well, that's a good opportunity to take to your customer if it's like a spot load or something that like, hey, I've got an option at $2,000 to ship today, or we can do it next week or something. And I remember my time, it was always like, do we have any options on this freight? Like we got 30 loads left for the day. Where are the options? We're working on them. Okay, so we're really just sitting and waiting for the phone to ring. So it's that day of is too late. 2 days before is starting to get too late. So it's really critical that as soon as that load gets built, the pre-booking process starts. And what we usually see from across our customers is they're getting about 3 times more options than they would with traditional methods. So it's a very different experience. So I'm gonna sort of hop in here, try to share my screen. I'm gonna refresh because who knows, this is a live demo and we're always told to not do live demos and webinars and stuff, but we're gonna try it anyways. And if it breaks, oh well, we'll see what happens. So generally what's gonna happen is your load gets built, your endpoint to endpoint, your trailer type, whether it's van, flatbed, reefer, whatever sort of equipment types we've got here. Then the pickup dates. And here's sort of the capacity list that we'll source from. You've got sort of in the application, you'll have like your network branded carriers, then those that are out of it if you ever wanted to expand beyond that. So I'm going to show you sort of what happens. We'll pull your load number. We'll pull the commodity. And again, nobody has to do any of this. All this stuff happens automatically. We set up the criteria during the onboarding implementation. And then we'll sort of calculate the price. Here's sort of where that rating engine comes into play. We can either take like your max buy and take off 10% and send that out, or we can supersede, like if our rate's lower, we can use ours to kick that out. There's a lot of calculations we can do. And again, all automated, because half the battle is people spending time setting max buys or thinking like, let's offer this one at 16 based on no real market data, just experience. And it's about like evolving that process and trying to like mimic what people like Adam know. So here's sort of that price that will go out. We'll pull the weight. Let's do 40,000 pounds. 45 is a little high. Let's not do that load. We'll pull the pickup date, times, any special instructions that are in your planning comments, dispatch comments, or anything there in McLeod. And then what's going to happen is this load offer is going to be triggered out. So all this is happening in the back end. Nobody's actually coming to the platform to do this. Here on the right, you can sort of see the activity log that these emails are going out much faster than a human can do. And what happens, ooh, you know what? I actually don't have my email server. Let me grab that open. I usually close my emails so I don't get any interruptions while I'm doing demos and stuff. But let me open this guy. So what this email looks like is really sort of, we're trying to make it look like it's coming from a human and not a system. So the carrier doesn't see all this jazz up here. They'll see it coming from like Adam from Simple is what they'll see. And we try to phrase it as like a real email, as if it's not automated, it's coming straight from a person. So we'll do like state to state, any trucks, and we'll say, you know, hey, dispatcher, hey, Jim, whoever we've got, this load just popped up. Can you run this for whatever that rate is? And everything here, McLeod is a great CMS for, you know, keeping a lot of data. There's a lot of customization we can do for whatever we want to put in this email. And it's really up to the user, right? Like we have our sort of suggestions and recommendations to start, but through the process, tailoring sort of how you guys want to work. We'll brand it with your logo, the names. We'll route all these emails straight back to the pods if you guys work in sort of account managers and work with specific customers. However it is, there's a lot of customization we can do. So most of the carriers are going to reply. We'll show some sort of stats and what that looks like later. The carriers can also sort of click this button here. I don't think we have this stat out for you guys, Adam, but what happens here is if the carrier clicks a counter, clicks that button, we try to reduce the friction to where the carrier doesn't have to log into anything. So this link is this page is linked right back to the carrier. They just enter their rate, click counter, and this sort of bid comes into McLeod on your sort of bid screen. I think, Adam, you're going to show a little bit what that looks like. This on average is about 11% of the time for simple logistics. It's not really a stat we usually look at because most carriers would rather just reply. But it happens. It still happens. And that's just sort of streamlining options right back to your TMS for you. So I'm going to hop back into this presentation here. And Adam, why don't you tell us sort of like what it looks like from your end?
Right. So like you said, no one's actually physically going on and sending those offers out. It's all done on the back end. Our load's built, and now I'm just working, going about my day, and this ends up in my inbox. It's a carrier offering to haul that load for $2,000. You can get his contact info, and I think it's funny sometimes where, some of the guys will be like, can you believe that guy just offered to do this for 27? It's like, well, they always shoot you something else on the phone too. The negotiation starts now. This is the fun part. C4 got it in front of your face. This guy, yes, he's $400 away from what you want. Call him now. Now use your skill, finish it up. They've done the 3-point shot. You can do a layup here, So I think it's smooth and it does look good to the eye, and it keeps it simple, keeps all the info on there. It'll show you, as you can see, the price. You can calculate per mile. You get all the carrier's info all on one page, all on one email. Make a folder for it, and your whole ops team can watch it. It's a race over here to see who can respond. They all want to book digitally, So
It's easier.
It's been a blast. It is, right?
Yeah. So on this,
and he's set up.
Yeah, exactly. No risk. So walk us through sort of here. The integration is again, everything happens in the back end. So it's really just like how you guys are set up and where the offers sort of live. They live a lot of times in your bid screen, but this is probably a common view for a lot of brokers that are on McLeod. Adam, tell us a little bit how you guys structure this.
Sure. So this is just a screenshot of my day-to-day board, and McLeod has been super easy to work with on allowing us to add certain fields. And if you look over to the left, we have that override target pay on there, and you can see one's got a price in there. Once that's in there, that load is now released. It's sent to wherever C4 sees best fit. So we're running into where, maybe you do have a buddy that might want to call first out of your little black book. So having a button that literally clicks it to release has been nice for us over here, or being able to put a price in there to blast off has been nice, and kind of controlling, maybe you're not ready for it to blast off yet, It's takes that human element back into it, and that's important to have. That control feels good sometimes. So
yeah. So here sort of, some results that you guys have seen. And we do this with a lot of our customers, sort of that first 30, 60 days, showing them sort of what some open rates are like in engagement. Simple sees roughly 60% or so of their freight gets opened by carriers. And the issue there is like a lot of times there's not a real good way to track some of these metrics. There's like Mailshake, MailChimp, some different things, but unless it's interacting with your data, it's really hard to understand of your freight how much of that are carriers engaging with you. So next would come like a reply rate. So 47% of the freight that gets pushed out, that's how many replies are literally coming to Simple. You guys often get like 1,000 replies a month. So it's pretty far up there, and damn near half your freight or so. So it's up there, and then comes down to about 8% of that. Those replies come in, to fruition to an actual like booked load. So it's good to see sort of some of these KPIs and what that actually means to your business. And on the right here, what we talked about earlier, that carrier retention, it always goes up as you book more freight digitally. Your carrier behavior starts to change organically. They're getting more freight, giving your team the chance to communicate with them, and the same back with the carrier. often 20 more hours saved a week just by booking digitally. When I think most of our freight, whenever it gets booked electronically, it's roughly in that 15-minute range or so of the time that the load gets triggered out than when the carrier actually books or you guys book. So that reduces the time to cover a load and even the compliance time there too. Often it's a reduction in your cost per load, roughly by like 74%. So often that cost per load's around like $90, $100 or so. When you drop that down to like subscription fees and things, it reduces that cost by almost 100%. So it's a good way to think about it. Happy to share some of those things, here after the call. So I'm going to launch sort of the last poll here. We're sort of at the conclusion. Maybe if I can figure that part out. Oh boy, where is that? I've got poll 1. There we go. I found it. I don't usually do like 2 separate polls like that. So a little different. So this next poll here is, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, Cargo Chief, and how we can integrate with your TMS, not just McLeod, but other TMSs as well. There's probably a short list of about half a dozen or a dozen, sorry. Then happy to talk here after the webinar. And 2, if you are looking for a new TMS, if you guys are growing or maybe you've got an asset side and you're looking to transition into brokerage and you want to learn more about McLeod Software, streamlining that sales process and getting direct contact to Mike, happy to loop you guys in here after the call. So as you guys sort of answer that, and we'll keep that private so no one can see the results, but we'll share that with the right person. Sort of want to ask a question. There's a few in the Q&A, but I'm going to sort of ask some of these common questions that we get. Adam, we get this question a lot, that some companies, they quickly understand that, yes, they're going to get time back. And we often hear that gives them the opportunity to take more freight and spend more time on those that, I don't know, probably have more meat on the bone rather than saying no, the worst thing that we could do. What are you guys sort of able to do with some of that time gained back?
Yeah, I think that probably is case dependent too on how you kind of have your business structured. So like I was joking with you the other day, I told you we've been trying this new thing over here where when we get our extra time, we shut down at the end of the day. No more posting, no more doing anything. We now are focusing 100% on carrier retention. Let's call the guys who did it before. Let's build some relationships. And you can't really do that every day unless you're covered, unless you're pre-booked. No one wants to leave today when you come in tomorrow and you have 90% of your loads uncovered, Yeah. So by booking digitally and staying ahead of the game, it allows you to use that time for really whatever you'd like. If it is finding new loads or, prospecting customers, maybe going back to the spot market and seeing what else you can add for that day. It's really not possible unless, you are freed up for time. So
yeah, that opportunity, it's usually the opportunity cost. A lot of times, right. What's the difference if you didn't have that time back, right? Like it's just playing catch up all day. So I guess Mike, I don't know if we're gonna have time. We're pretty much here at the hour, a minute over. But Mike, I guess the last thing for you, those that are in the market sort of for another TMS, can you share a little bit about what that onboarding and implementation looks like? I know when I've used McLeod, that shop already had McLeod, so I've never personally seen that. So I can't really talk to it, but can you share a little bit sort of what that looks like?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That vetting out process. So between the salesperson and someone, either myself or someone on my team, we'll usually come on site or we can do it virtually. We'll do a deep dive into how are you operating today? How are you paying carriers? How are you paying your brokers? How are you onboarding today? Just what's that process that you're working at today and then we'll show you how that's going to look inside of McLeod.
Yeah.
So that's usually a full day. We like to do a deep dive within your organization. We're meeting with every department between creating orders all the way to finance, settlements, and billing as well.
Yeah, that's really important because if you don't know how that broker operates, how are you sure that this is going to work, right? Like it's been interesting to, like, I thought I knew all the ways to book freight, but there's thousands of them. And it's always interesting when we go do a customer visit and see like this little thing was different and how that impacts product adoption or just the business entirely is it's really fascinating, I guess, to see how brokers operate differently. So we're not going to get to any Q&A here. We are at the end, so I want to be respectful for time, but just want to appreciate or thank everybody for joining today. Mike, Adam, it was a pleasure having you guys here and talking a little bit more about this. So for everyone else, we'll share the recording for those that would like it, and you'll have the link. And again, if you'd like to hear more about how simple logistics is sort of booking freight digitally, feel free to reach out to Adam on LinkedIn, or go to their website to find out a little bit more about Simple Check Logistics, right? And Mike,
That's right.
and for Mike, if I'm sure LinkedIn's a good avenue for you, or channel, or even connecting with you directly, and we'll share some contact information with everybody here at the end of the call. So thank you everybody for joining, and y'all have a good rest of your week and good weekend.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Adam.
See you
Yep.
later.
Take care, guys.
Bye.